Welcome to today's episode. And what we're going to do today, we are going to really get into a topic that is not just timely, but very essential: mental health and well being. As men, we often carry the weight of expectations, responsibilities, and societal pressures that can take a toll on our mental health. It's time we shed this stigma and have an open, honest conversation about what it means to take care of our minds just as we take care of our bodies. Today, we're going to talk about stress management, emotional intelligence, and mindfulness, and how it can transform our approach to life's challenges. We're not just talking about surviving, we're talking about thriving. So whether you're new to the conversation or have been on your mental health journey for a while, this episode will equip you with insights and strategies to enhance your well-being and support those around you. So let's get started. Man, so with that being said, man, like I said, we talking about mental health and well-being. So this is something that we started hearing, I think, a whole lot about, especially during 1920, during the COVID years or whatever like that. A lot of people seemed like they were going into mental health. They were talking about well-being, everybody on podcasts, all these different things. So whether it's good or bad, what comes to your brain when you hear mental health and or well-being?
Hmm. Very unpopular answer. Um, it is a space where it is lopsided and unequal. Um, and this is what I mean when I say that. Um, I really do believe, unless it is specific to a thing, nobody really cares. And I'm being transparent when I say this, not just as a man, as a black man, as a former soldier, as a entrepreneur, contractor, as a father, as a former husband. Right? Nobody cares. Now, where do they care? They care in the space of healthcare. They care in the space of your profession. They care in the space of domestic concerns. You see what I'm saying? But those are more reactive in nature as opposed to being more proactive. And so we don't do enough proactive work in the space of mental health and mental well being, um, as opposed to doing the reactionary measures that go behind it. So something has to happen. When it came down to us being in the army, they had no idea what PTSD was until after OIF 1, when soldiers started coming home and then they started reacting to their situation because they could not mentally disconnect from Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever that looks like. So, still, the reactive nature of a thing. Some people were the benefactors of the reactive nature because they came afterwards, so it felt like it was proactive for them, but really it wasn't because they were still learning. You look at domestic violence issues, you look at just normal everyday interaction. There are a lot of people who still need mental health counseling and well being, and they have no idea. If you've ever experienced any traumatic event, sure, there is this thing within you that defines the resiliency, your ability to bounce back. But who determines that in your family, whether or not you have that? How much resiliency you have at your current level? Where does resiliency begin within the scope of the home? Like, where's that taught? You know, when you look at the separation of mama and daddy, like, what about the kids? Do we actually consider the mental health and well-being of the kids? So as you can see, bro, I can go on and on and on about this particular topic because I don't even think we've really scratched the surface when it comes down to this.
Man, I agree. I think that, when you look on the social media and even sometimes in my personal life, I think there are a lot of men out there who are not taking care of themselves mentally. Um, for whatever reason. I think some of it is stereotypes, certain perceived, you're going to be put in this type of category if you go and talk to somebody in mental health. I remember, like, in the military, at some point I remember the OGs or some of the older guys in the military talking about how they didn't want to go to mental health because they thought that there would be a mark or a stain on their record that would prevent them from being promoted, to some of the senior ranks, and I remember this as a young soldier. And now I think back and I look at that and I was like, man, that was something else. That was crazy that was the mindset of people, of certain soldiers back then. Whether it was true or not, I don't know. They say sometimes that certain rumors, starts, and it's sometimes there's a little bit of truth in there somewhere. So whether it is or whether or not, I don't really care at this point. But I think it's just good to point out that good, bad, or indifferent, there was something that certain soldiers thought about, back in the day. I wonder if they still do. Wonder
I'm
if they
almost
still
certain.
think about
I'm
stuff.
almost certain they do
Yeah.
because you also have to realize that there were certain consequences and repercussions back then, right?
Mhm.
Surrounding mental health.
Yeah.
If you were like self-reported or psychology, and I'm not speaking based upon clearly defined doctrine or whatever the case may be, but if you were to self-report or you had to go to the psych ward or whatever the case may be because of some circumstance, um, then that could affect your ability to to gain or even maintain a security clearance
Yeah.
because of those nuances that surrounds this whole notion of mental health. People's kind of they steered away from it, right? They veered clear of it because they felt that it would influence or affect their career in some shape, form, or fashion.
I will say, to answer this question, I get everything you're saying. I'm gonna go a little different way because I see this. I see it a lot on social media, when I'm scrolling, not all the time in my FYP, but I do come across it, especially being a counselor and a coach. You hear people talk about, they use their mental health issues. I have a mental health issue, and they use that as an excuse for bad behavior. I think sometimes, it's like, well, I can't help it. I got ADHD. This is just how I am. And it's like, yes, you can still have ADHD, which is actual disorder, but it doesn't necessarily mean that certain parts of it can't be contained. And just like, oh, I have anxiety and blah blah blah. Like, there were some kids that came in the office today, and one was talking about the level of anxiety that her and her boyfriend experienced, and they're in the 11th grade. And I'm just like, man, like, are you serious? Like, what were you really going through? And I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to, belittle or make light of their situation. But what I am saying is that there is a group of people who are using, them having some sort of mental health as an excuse to just not treat people right. And I don't think that that's cool.
Yeah, I get that. Um, I don't want to sound cynical. I will
Mhm.
start there. But I have to believe if I am made aware of a thing, then there has to be a way for me to now start moving in the direction to help. I don't want to say fix, more like correct the thing that I'm now aware of. For me, and again, I'm not taking anything away from anyone because I don't have the experience that says I know what it's like to have this disorder, that disorder, whatever that looks like, right? But to become aware of a thing is like the gateway into helping me improve it, not perfect it, right? But just by me knowing it, then I can, of course, with the right people in place, right? Then I can start doing the things that I can do to help overcome it and not necessarily use it as a perceived handicap, right? Just because I know I have the thing, it's not a handicap and a carrier's card for me to say, hey, take this and accept what I do. Heck
Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
and this is coming from a person who knows several people who have children that have certain, things, and again, good, bad, or indifferent. Some are more mild than the others, But at the end of the day, what I value in those relationships, I see that they don't use it as an excuse. They actually say, okay, this is the thing. Now, how are we going to work around this
Yep.
thing? How are we going to set you up so that you can be successful at life? And that's the thing I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's the how it should be approached at the end
Yeah.
of the day. We were talking about men. We're gonna talk about some challenges, right? So, what are the biggest challenges men face when trying to prioritize their mental health? How can these barriers be overcome? We don't even have to answer the second part if we don't want to. But I
I'll do it
definitely,
all. I'm
definitely
here.
want, definitely want to talk about the first part of it.
Yeah, I'm here for it all today, bro.
Yeah.
Ego. I'm just going to put
Ego.
it out there. A man has to overcome his ego. You are not Superman. I don't care what she tells you. You're not Superman, right? You need to understand that, listen, if you don't necessarily get the right help that you need in all aspects of your being holistically, you will break. You can, listen, it's an old saying, pressure bust pipes. And you
Mm-hmm.
know and you know how we do. We'll come home from work, go grab us something cold to drink, relax a little bit, unwind. She may come in and say, "Hey, how's your day?" It was good. We're not really telling you the truth. We're just telling you the things so that you don't keep prying because I don't want to share the details of my job with you. Well, why don't you want to share the details of your job with me? Because I don't want to bring work home. This feels like bringing work home. I don't want to take you to the job. I want to enjoy the sanctity of my home. So
Yes.
it starts with recognizing that you're not Superman. Get over your ability to think that you're okay just because some, I mean, like we talked about in the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ability to have conversations and be in a safe space and recognizing that the person that I'm having conversation with, I am trusting that this person has my best interest at heart. If
Mm-hmm.
you are in a situation, a relationship, whatever, even if you're single, I don't care, if you don't have that in your life, that is one of the biggest problems that exists. You need to have an outlet. Like somebody need to be able to look you in your face, like somebody told me years ago and say, "Hey, you need to go see a professional." That was one of the best things that ever happened to me because I had no idea. It was a blind spot for me. And I was like, really? And I was like, yeah, like you have an ability to ramp it up just like that. And
Mm-hmm.
when I got that bit of information, I said, you know what? I'm gonna listen. I'm a little older, as they would say, a little long in the tooth these days, right?
Yeah. Long in the tooth.
Right. So I'm gonna listen and I'm gonna go see. And when I took that test, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. So one of the biggest challenges is their ego. Get over yourself. You're not as young as you used to be. And here's the best part about it. A lot of the things that you seen when you was young, it wasn't good for you anyway. And that's part of the problem that you're dealing with right now as a man. You're trying to put it all together in your head. And I want to be clear. It's not a man specific conversation. This is a man and a woman conversation because women face some of the same problems we face. They had to be supermen based upon, I mean, super women, I'm sorry. They had to be super women based upon some of the things that they had to deal with all the way up to this point. So the idea behind this is to construct a conversation so that we can know that we don't have to be super people. We can just be super for one another. And I think when we look at that, we can get to the point and say, hey, just like I go get my blood pressure checked, just like I go, all that other, wellness stuff, part of that needs to be mental health as well. I need to go sit down and talk to somebody periodically just so I can share what's going on with in my life so they can kind of help me put these things together in my head. Because if not, I'm just going to put it on the shelf and compartmentalize. Man, when I compartmentalize, that's not good because I feel like I don't have a space to get it out. And how can these barriers be overcome? First place for me is having a trusted person like this young man right here, somebody that you can talk to and vent and be open and honest. And then the feedback that he gives me, I take it, and because I know it's coming from a good place.
Man, I like all of that. I think one of the biggest challenge men face when trying to prioritize is prioritizing their mental health, and that goes back to what you said previously about the proactive work. Like being proactive about your mental health prevents can prevent the ulcers. It can prevent the blowing up, the honking and sticking up your middle finger, and the road rage that you have when someone cuts you off. When you're in when you're in a good mental place and someone cuts you off, you know that it's them and not you. And you're just like, I don't got time for it. Every once in a while, you may just be in the moment and you just let it go. But when you get to a certain place in your life, where when it comes to mental health and you have good mindsets and you have a really good mental health, and you do things intentionally to take care of your mental health, just a lot of things just don't bother you anymore. You realize that you don't want to give your energy to a whole bunch of stuff that you can't control in the first place. And I think that when men don't prioritize that, that's one of the biggest challenges. And how can these barriers be overcome? By being intentional and prioritizing your mental health. Like you said, being proactive and not reactive. Yes, it's good to, after, you have something to maybe go back and think about it and reflect on, the situation where you may have gotten upset at somebody. I get all of that. But when you are more proactive, you don't have to get to a place to where you're angry and upset and sticking up your middle finger. You know what I mean? So um I I I believe anyway that everybody should be doing something for their mental health every day. And mental health doesn't necessarily mean just sitting on the floor in the yoga pose and, humming, you know. Yeah, that can be mental health if that's what you want to do, but mental health could be anything that makes your mental more healthy, working out your mental. So if something that you really enjoy doing is playing football with the kids, well, the more you get to play football and run around with your kids, the better mental health you're going to have. If you enjoy fishing and that really relaxes you and just brings a lot of clarity, and you can be out there listening to music or just listening to nature and fishing, and that helps your mental health, then prioritize that. Do more of it. Be intentional with it. Put those things on the list. Just like, when you get paid, you say, I'm going to pay this, I'm going to pay this, I'm going to pay this. Do the same thing with your life. Figure out how you're going to pay yourself a mental salary every single day or every single week. Do something for yourself.
I so like that, and I like the fact that you brought up the things that put people in a place of what I tend to call Zen, right?
Mm,
Put you in a very relaxed state, whatever the case may be. But this is the thing that I've witnessed. I've witnessed you have people like to exist in the extremes. Well, being in the extremes does not necessarily help me to understand that my mental health is good, right? I need to be able to, and that's why I kind of mentioned the whole resiliency thing earlier. I need to be able to be in a situation and recognize that this situation either sends me to one extreme or the other. If I get to set the conditions of the situation, and therefore that puts me in a relaxed state of being, like going out to going out to the lake and getting in the boat, and I'm not going to do it, but getting in the boat and riding out
mm,
to the middle of the lake with my fish in the water and relaxing in the sun, all kind of, and I'm just at peace. Well, that's great. That's recharging, right? But what happens when I'm in that traffic and grandma cuts me off doing about a whole 15 miles per hour at 45, stuff like that.
yeah.
Do I cuss grandma out? You know what I'm saying? Am I just yelling and punching the roof while I'm driving down the street? Or do I recognize that, okay, I'm good? You know what I'm saying? And just signal light on, drive around and look and say, oh, this is an elderly woman. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
then just keep going. So I think that's the thing. I think there has to be enough recharge that happens and enough to build up this thing in you so that when you're put in those situations, they act as a buffer, right? I think that becomes extremely important. And I think that starts at home with little Jimmy, little Tamika, little Tommy when they're growing up. You cannot tell your child yes to everything and expect them to be emotionally or expect them to be resilient when life happens to them. If they're expecting everything to happen when they want it to happen, how they want it to happen, first time life tells them no, the first time they go ask, Tamika out on a date, and she says, no. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. Now they're all like downtrodden and in the dumps and like really licking their wounds and in the room with the door closed and sad music playing because they're recycling thought. Like these are all of the things that we're talking about. And it's not, and I know we're talking about it like in one arena, but it's a wide arena of events. Like what happens when you lose your best friend? You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. Do you go into a downward spiral and you stay stuck in depression because you were never brought up to it in a space to where you had to learn and develop how to be resilient. So all of these things factor. Then next thing you know, they become adults and end up on the roof with a doggone a sniper rifle. Like, come on. Like a lot of this goes back to parenting. And in our generation, we seen some hard times.
Whole bunch of hard times.
Yeah.
That kind of segue, we kind of talked about it, so I'm gonna skip a couple of questions, and I'm gonna go down to this one because I think we kind of start talking around it. So, what impact does societal expectation have on men's willingness to seek mental health and support, and how do we reshape these norms?
I don't think it's clear. I think on one hand, we talk about mental health. We got mental health awareness month. We got all these things, awareness piece. But then on the other hand, I'm not necessarily seeing the support system that says it. Sure, if you go out there and seek it, but this is the thing: for a thing that I know clearly to be available for everyone, it should be easy to obtain. But if
Hmm.
it costs me a large amount of money, then everybody can't get it. So I'm not just when we say societal, I'm not sticking to what just social media's interpretation is. I'm talking about the whole scope of it. Mental health is expensive. Let's be
Hmm.
honest.
Yeah,
In most cases, you need insurance to pay for it. In most cases, especially if it's going to be a prolonged relationship with you and your
yeah.
counselor. Well,
It ain't
everybody,
just a pill.
right?
Hmm.
Everybody, and that goes into a different arena. Now we're
Yeah.
talking about, the oh man, what do you call it? It'll come after a while, but that's different. And then when you start talking about the pill, those pills themselves are expensive. So it's not just
Hmm.
the visit, the hours. It's also the pill, and then oh yeah, by the way, it's gonna be a side effect. So there's a side
Hmm.
effect. You might have to get prescribed another medication go along with it, right?
Hmm.
So um, that becomes problematic for us to know you need a thing, and that thing that you need is out of the scope of the average person.
Yeah.
Now, I got it. There's a whole bunch of other dynamics that we can bring into this conversation. I got some people already saying, like, well, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps society. I got that part. I understand that. People got to be responsible for their own life. Yep, I got that part too. But let's just be honest, man. To some people, life happens. And I'm not making excuses for nobody, but they're caught in large cases, they're caught in the cycle. I wrote a white paper on this when I was doing my graduate studies. They're caught in the cycle, and the cycle by itself is a self-licking ice cream cone. And what ends up happening is that a small percentage of them get out of that cycle. But this is all they've seen growing up, and then next thing you know, they're the adults. And what behaviors do you think they're repeating? They're repeating the same behaviors that they're seeing. So this just keeps going around and round and round. But who is getting mental health counseling over there? Who is worried about emotional intelligence over there? You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it becomes problematic for one group of people to get the help that they needed. Now you factor in other groups of people. Other groups of people can get it because they got insurance, they can afford it, whatever that looks like. They probably know some people who know some people who actually
Hmm.
exist in that realm who may help them out. I'll be honest with you. So when you look at the impact of societal expectation looks like one way and one way only. Get mental health counseling. But it's not that easy. What does it look like to get mental health counseling for every man, woman, and child? And if we don't have an answer for everybody, we don't have an answer.
Yeah. I like that. Um, I'm looking at these societal expectations and I'm thinking about, you know, who At what point in life do we start hearing about mental health and seeking mental health? I know for me, it wasn't until I was an adult, probably in my 30s. You know, when I was teen and 20s, like I really don't remember thinking too much about my mental health. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
know, I heard a little bit of stuff about what people said in the military, but I didn't have any type of knowledge about it. So, because I didn't have any knowledge about it, especially, you know, as far as being proactive, there was no willingness to seek mental health because it wasn't something that was talked about. It wasn't something, the information wasn't out there. There wasn't information about, and even now, I'm going back to the proactive thing that you talked about.
Hmm.
There is not really people talking about proactive. Like if you look at the commercials, I don't remember. It's like the commercials talk about after
Yeah.
something has happened. It's,
Yep.
it's like what they focus on the after work. But it's like the commercials don't really talk about the proactive work. I don't know if there's a big space where people, generally talk about the proactiveness of something. It's like, you know, create the problem and then create the solution and then sell the solution. So it's like seems like it's a lot of that. Whereas the proactive part, and like you said, it's expensive. So who in their 20s and early 30s and stuff are really, like I said, thinking about it or even have the funds to go out there and be proactive with their mental health. I wasn't really proactive with it. It was kind of after some things that happened. And then, like you said, we think we're being proactive, but really not,
Right.
So I didn't start going to seeing a therapist until I was my late 30s before the first time I went to go see anybody.
I had two stints, and I might be getting a little ahead. Um, I went the first time when I was young because I was extremely angry, um, and they really thought something was wrong with me. I wasn't trying to hear it. So we go see the counselor, and I'm sitting in there. You know what I'm saying? I'm a little
Mhm,
knucklehead, man. I got my arms crossed, and she's talking to me, and I'm just looking at her. And my mom and my stepdad sitting right there, right? And so we're talking, right? And so eventually I got to the point that I actually started talking to her. And then by
mhm,
the time we all got finished, they was like this. She was like, "There's nothing wrong with him. He's just mad.
mhm,
That's all it
yeah,
is." Like based upon everything we talked about, like he's seen a lot of things that doesn't make sense to him, and now you're asking him to accept this, and so forth and so on, and
yeah,
all of these different changes that's coming, and you got to realize he's at that age. He's at 15, 16 years old. He's coming into a little man, so he thinks he's a man, right? There's nothing wrong with him mentally. He's just angry. And
mm,
then like you, my next stint was in my early 30s. Well, yeah, early 30s, OIF1.
mhm,
And that's when I had more of the prolonged visitations. That was my first. It was it was the first time they started doing the mass mental health counseling for PTSD. And you got to realize we did OIF1 and we came back. They didn't have an answer after that. So it was like the second time. Now it's like, okay, well, let's get these guys to PTSD counseling. So I seen her for like 8 months straight, bro.
mm,
And it took her 3 months to get me to talk to her. First three visits, I just went up in there. Like, if you ever seen Antoine Fisher, that was me. Like,
mhm,
went up in there. I didn't say nothing. I just sat there and looked. We done yet? Yep. All right, I'm out. So I would go there, sit for an hour, look at my watch. And you got to ask yourself the question as a full grown adult, what make you so hesitant to have a conversation with somebody else about how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're responding to life? Like we got like if we really stop and think into that, because I was totally resistant. And it's not an abnormal response. That's common. It's common when you first have somebody go to counseling therapy, whatever that looks like. It's very common that they are resisting the therapy environment. But then eventually they relax. So it's I got to be here. I'm gonna be here anyway. So here's what you got. And so yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would say you think any of it has to do with trust is the reason why people or you maybe people won't open up.
Sure, but I think if I leave it at trust, it doesn't really, and this is not on you, of course. I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time we use trust like a get out of jail free card, right?
Mm.
But I don't want to say trust and leave it at trust because trust by itself don't need your permission, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the idea, the concept, the mantle of trust doesn't need my permission. But what it needs me to do is trust that it exists. So if I am trusting in trust, then I don't necessarily have to pin it to you. But what we try to do is take it and pin it to the other person. And when we pin it to the other person, now that gives you an accountability metric to me, which in turn becomes another version of control. So to
Mm-hmm.
relinquish the notion of control, we trust the counseling, the coaching, the therapy environment is available for everybody, but we must both be fully participative in it. Therefore, I never relinquish you your responsibility for this relationship because it make no mistake about it, it's a relationship. Um, but here's the side to it that makes it difficult. No one ever teaches that coming out of home. So if you don't teach me that coming up from up under the roof of mom and daddy, I think trust is something that I get to put around your neck and I keep the key to
Mm.
it. I keep the key to it when I walk away from you. Therefore, now when I come back to you, if it's damaged in any shape, form, or fashion, it's your fault. You did it. But that's not really an authentic place for trust because trust by exists without your presence. That's the other part to it. And so I go the rest of my life trusting people when I was never supposed to trust people. I was supposed to trust that trust exists. So
Mm.
I agree to your question. The answer is yes, but it's only because we don't understand trust. And now I'm sitting here and the relationship say, hey, you want to participate? Nope. You want to participate? Nope. And the counselor's on the other side, like, hey, I'm here if you want to talk. Yeah, thanks. I'm not talking to you. Me and Trust trying to figure this thing out first. Trust,
Mm-hmm.
like, you want to participate? Nope. You still don't
Nope.
want to participate? Man, we've been doing this for 3 weeks now, 3 months now. Yeah, I got it. I'm starting to get to know who you are, but I'm not ready to open up yet. Okay, you're gonna come back next week? Yeah, I'm coming. Me and Trust having a conversation now. The
Mm-hmm.
counselor is just sitting there. I'm here whenever you want to talk. I'm just sitting here putting some notes in or whatever. And so the fourth time I show up, Trust, like, you ready? I'm like, okay, fine, I'll play now. So
Mm-hmm.
now Trust steps aside, and now me and the other person can now have an open conversation with Trust being the overseer. But no one teaches that.
Yeah. I know it's kind of new information to me as well. Never really heard it never heard it put that way as either. So definitely appreciate that. Thank
Yeah, but see, if any other way, it gives the impression that your version of trust is better, more important, or more complete than mine. And
you.
neither.
Hmm. Well, I was just saying, yeah.
No, no, no.
Oh.
I was responding to what you were saying. If we
Oh,
don't
okay.
look at it that way, what we do is we kind of downplay what we believe and then uplift somebody else's belief.
But since we talking about the mind and stuff like that, let's talk about some emotional intelligence. So how can emotional intelligence affect a man's overall well-being? How can it be cultivated?
Hmm. Um, Kind of goes back to what we talked about previously. We first got to understand what emotional intelligence is. And I know some people like to say it's the ability to manage my emotions intelligently. Okay, great. Only thing we did is jam two words together and try to define both of them. But it's really is my ability to not allow my emotions to dictate the outcome of the environment. And if I'm really good at it, I won't allow yours to do it either.
Mm-hmm.
But that also involves a lot of self reflection, assessments, and adjustments within self. So when we talk about how can emotional intelligence affects a man's overall well-being, immensely, because it always requires me to take a look within to understand what I'm thinking, feeling, and choosing at every given moment. Again, thinking, feeling, and choosing. Why? Because that's what emotions are. Remember, we talked about that a few weeks back. The subjective response, the subjective interpretation, the physiological response, and the actual the actual physical response, the behavioral response, right? So emotional intelligence makes me consider what I'm thinking, feeling, and choosing in every aspect of my life. And if the outcome is unfavorable to me or anyone that I'm connected with, then I go back and make micro adjustments so I can respond differently. Being able to do that is a clear sign of good mental health. However, if I think that what I'm thinking is infinite, by itself, it is no new information that I am willing to receive. Like this right here is complete. Everybody I encountered in my life is wrong. I'm right, all y'all wrong. You know what I'm saying? That's something that we really need to take a look at. Look, here's the deal. You've been married 7 times and you single now. Chances are you're the common denominator. You see what I'm saying? Like at some point, the facts have to make sense to me.
Mhm.
If the facts don't make sense to me, then I can't blame everything else that contributed to the facts when I'm the common denominator. That is a problem right there within itself. And if I can't see that about myself, then there is a serious concern. Emotional intelligence by itself will help me to analyze me and make the micro adjustments so that I can get to the point of continuing to get better, progress, and become more emotionally aware in the moment. Because now we go from one stage of awareness to the next stage of management, and not just management, but also social interaction. Therefore, now, because I've been this open and honest with myself about myself, now I can have better relationships, more healthier relationships. I don't go into a frenzy whenever things don't work out the way I want it to work out, because I don't think the world rotates on the axis of how I feel. How can it be cultivated? By getting to the point to where we recognize first and foremost that everything I'm thinking isn't complete. You know what I'm saying? Getting to the point to recognizing that there's some information that I got that's wrong. There's some things that need to be adjusted. I don't know everything there is to know. Recognizing my biases that I have, because everybody have them, right? Recognizing, identifying, and making the adjustment about my biases. Getting to the point of understanding the 4 stages of emotional intelligence kind of helps as well. Being aware of emotional intelligence make you aware of emotional intelligence. What is this emotional intelligence thing? How do I get there? Like that alone helps, right? Understanding awareness, emotional awareness, being aware of my emotion helps me to get to the point of moving into the next phase as well. So when we look at cultivating being more emotional and I'm sorry, when we look at cultivating emotional intelligence, understanding it mentally and experiencing it in an environment, seeing other people who are emotional intelligent kind of help us to recognize, like, hey, I'm struggling with, like, I seen the way you handled that consistency, coach, and I am struggling with that. Like, I give you a perfect example. We talked about it previously, and I sent the video to you.
Mhm.
Another brother of ours, Kendrick Lynn, John Maxwell guy, great guy. If you know, shout out Kendrick Lynn if you're out there, if you're listening, bro. He sent me a video with David Goggins and Damian Lillard. You could literally see on Damian Lillard's face when he was working out, like the mental struggle that he was going through. And I can relate, because I've been through some things physically, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I don't need this. I can go do something else, and I don't have to put myself through this. And then you start hearing words come out of his mouth that helps you to understand what he's thinking at that point in time. How do you get to the point in the midst of that pain? And you know what I'm talking about, because you're training for a marathon right now. How do you get to the point in the middle of that pain, that struggling, where you start feeling sorry for yourself in the midst of doing so, where you start leaning on the resiliency and the emotional intelligence that you built up over time and say, hey, you know what? This is just for a moment. Keep pushing. Don't stop. That voice for Damian Lillard sounded like David Goggins on the other tread on the other bike. Say, hey, let's go, pick it up. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of, it's a long-winded response, bro. But I think all of that is inclusive.
Yeah, man. And I don't even really want to even go mess with that no more. You did a really good job of all of that. I think if I'll add to it, I want to say, similar to what you said, how can emotional intelligence affect a man's overall well being, you know, immensely. it can have it has a direct impact over so many other things in your life. The emotional intelligence and how you deal with things, your well-being, how you respond to people, how people respond to you, whether or not people can trust you with information. All of that stuff is kind of wrapped up into emotional intelligence and well-being. If you are a person, you are a man, and every time your wife says something to you, you fly off the handle, and you don't have the right words to have a good conversation with her, your well-being is probably not going to be good. You know what I mean? Your household is going to be in uproar, and different things like that. So I think it's very important for men and women and anybody who may be watching that, your emotional intelligence directs so many other parts of your life. It's just like, our spinal cord or our heart. Our heart is the muscle that pumps the blood throughout every other part of the body. You know what I mean? But the heart is so important, and without it, you know, you ain't gonna have no blood. So the same thing, if your emotional intelligence is jacked up, your well-being is jacked up, your life ain't gonna have no blood to it. Your relationships won't have any blood to it. They'll be dead. So I think it's very important that men do focus on that. And I'm just gonna ditto everything you said about the cultivation piece, because I ain't even touching that. That was that was on point. If I was thinking about it, I would have hit the gold bar, would have hit the gold, what's it called? You know what I mean? The gold nugget.
The
There we
golden
go.
nugget, yeah.
Gold nugget. But one thing we are going to do is I do want to make sure that we get out of here on time. Last week we kept them a little bit long, so we got 15 minutes. So we're going to start earlier tonight, and we're going to start with some of these true false questions. We also have some I got a couple of scenarios and some multiple choice questions. So honestly, I don't know how I closed that other window out. But with that being said, folks, here is the first true false question of the night. True or false? Men are less likely than women to seek mental health issues.
As disturbing as this is, I would say, as I give people time to actually put their comments in the chat, one of the things I've learned is that women are more open and honest and transparent when it comes down to going to the doctor. For whatever reason, men struggle with that. I don't know if it's something from our childhood rearing years or whatever that looks like. But so the answer is men are less likely than women. Yes, they are less likely than women to seek help for mental health issues.
Yeah. I haven't looked at any numbers, but it's my assumption that it would be the same thing, for a lot of those same reasons. Um,
I said, yes, I'm
even
sorry. True. The answer is true.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, like even going to the doctor, it's like, you might need to tell him about certain things, but you also know that if you tell him about certain things, they're gonna want to check certain things. And you know, I get it. It ain't
Yeah,
just mental, it's physical health issues as well. But for this, definitely mental.
absolutely.
Um Next, emotional intelligence is solely about recognizing emotions in others.
Yeah, I just kind of talked about that in detail. Absolutely, absolutely not.
Yeah,
It,
absolutely not.
it starts with you. You can't recognize somebody else's emotions until you first understand yours. I think it's a big misconception to where a lot of people feel like they have like this because you've been told a thing your whole life. You think you're good at it, and so you stop assessing you and you start assessing everybody else. No, don't do that. Work on self first.
Man, what's funny about that is that when you get to a certain level of emotional intelligence and you can really recognize these things, man, you recognize them in everybody. You was like, darn it, man, this person really need to go and talk to somebody. this person really need to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
And
it's
and
like,
and the
dang, they just
difficult
don't
part,
get it.
yeah, and the difficult part is like you have an extreme amount of compassion for the other person. But
Yeah.
like even in the midst of conversation, you can hear them recycling their thoughts in the conversation, and you're asking questions like, let me slide over here and ask this question right here. Same recycling thoughts. I'm like, you're not seeing it, and it's largely because they don't want to see it at that point in time.
Yeah, man. I know some people like that. Moving on. Chat, we still here. Regular exercise has no significant impact on mental health.
There is no question in my mind that the chat is going to get this one 100% right. So, without further ado, regular exercise has a huge impact on mental health. That's why the Army does PT in the morning before they go to work.
Absolutely. You already know I'm on that 100 times. Absolutely. Like, I cannot tell you, like, when you was talking about the David Goggins and Dame Lillard stuff, because we kind of talked about it even before the show. Like, I get that, man. Like, we talked about, earlier, like, I look at that schedule over there and that joker got 13 miles on it Saturday. And it's like,
Hmm,
whew, I'm about to break in some areas I ain't never been through. And then it's like, I don't have to do that.
hmm,
You know what I mean? So mentally, I understand that for me, by doing hard things, it makes life easier. After, like, I got up this morning and I ran 8 miles, and I had to leave the house by 6 o'clock.
hmm.
So that means I had to be done by 5:30. So I had to start at 4 so I could be done by 5:30, right? And mentally, I was like, "Bro, you ain't even got to do it this morning. You can just take this one off."
Yeah,
So, but I will say that, after I did that, like, the rest of the day is easy after that. Like, I've done the hardest thing that I've had to do already. So everything else, and I pushed through that because I did not want to do it this morning.
yeah.
I gotta do it again tomorrow. But it's part of it. Here we go. Moving on. Stress management techniques like mindfulness can reduce the risk of chronic illness.
Again, another one I am going to attempt to take my time with answering because I believe that the chat would definitely have the right answer. So, stress management techniques like mindfulness, and of course, the different types of mindfulness activities can reduce the risk of chronic illnesses. That is a true statement.
True it up. Let's hit these last two real quick. A strong social network can contribute to better mental well-being in men or women.
True.
You talked about that.
Yep.
Talked about that. Having a circle, having brothers, having wolf pack, having sheep hacks, whatever they call, whatever, I don't know.
Like
You
just
learn
being
something.
able to get it out, man. You know what I'm saying? Pressure bust
Yeah,
pipe. That's a real statement. Just get it out.
sure does.
Yeah.
Sure does. Last one. Mental health discussions are still widely stigmatized in men's circles.
I think we're getting better at it though.
Yep.
Um, the answer is true, but I think we're getting better at it. What better looks like, I think we talk about it on a surface level. Um, there are some there are some circles to where men are getting to the point of being honest and transparent and vulnerable. Um, because again, like we've talked about before, it's almost as though if I tell you the truth, it makes me look like less of a man. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's not true. It's not true at all.
Facts. I'm with you. True.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh oh.
Here we go. What is one major benefit of practicing mindfulness? Is it A, improve physical strength, B, enhance emotional regulation, C, increase financial success, or D, better social skills?
Hmm. See what you did here. I like
Mhm,
this. I like
mhm.
this.
Been learning
So
from you.
So the answer is A, B, C, and D. However, if I had to pinpoint one singular answer, it would be B. But I think it's every last one of them.
Yeah, it can definitely help with all of them, but I will with you. Definitely enhance emotional regulation. Whew. You can just talk to people.
Yes, sir.
Man, come on, where's the next one? Okay, here we go. Which of the following is a common barrier for men seeking mental health support? A, the lack of resources. B, fear of stigma. C, time constraints. Or D, all of the above.
Now this one's good, really good. And I know as people are watching this one, they're looking at C and like, how in the world is C an answer? Well, let me explain. As you guys are putting your answer in the chat, C can be an answer if that man has a full time job, if that man got to come home and go to the baseball game because his son plays baseball, or go to his son's baseball practice, or basketball practice, or football practice, or whatever that looks like. Still got to spend time and cater to his wife, and then got to wake up the next day and repeat all of that over again. Lo and behold, if they're about to do 13 miles, like my friend down here, so it can be C as well. And that's I just wanted to comment on that because I know somebody was thinking about it. I would say the clear cut answer is B, fear of stigma. But like you heard me talk about previously as well, those resources aren't there for everybody. Like some people just don't have access to it because they can't afford it. So B is the clear defined answer for me.
All right. What role does emotional intelligence play in mental well being? A, it has no significant impact. B, it helps in recognizing and managing emotions. C, it improves physical health only. Or D, it makes people more intelligent.
Ah, very good, very good. So C is eliminated because it has the word only in it. Right.
Hmm.
Once the word only shows up. Now, if the word only wasn't in there, it will still be a part of the equation.
Hmm.
I do like D because what we've learned is that intelligence is a facet of learning, not necessarily a facet of intellectual quotient, which is what we thought at one point in time. We thought IQ was intelligence, but it's not that. It's just your ability to learn. Whether we're talking emotional adversity, whether we're talking social, all of those things.
Hmm.
So I would say because that is the case, D is still part of the equation. It helps people recognizing and managing their emotions, absolutely, and it has no significant impact. Wrong answer. So B and D is definitely my go-to, but definitely B is the clear number one.
I can rock with that. Which of the following is a key component of stress management? A, ignoring stressors. B, engaging in physical activity. C, increasing work hours. Or D, avoiding social interactions.
What most people do is D. I'm just gonna spit it out.
Hmm. Yep, they go and just get off Facebook.
Yep.
But
Go cut.
Facebook ain't the problem. Facebook is the distractor. Oh,
See what you did
yeah,
there. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
yeah.
Um, So I would definitely have to say B with these selections, right? Engaging in a physical activity. It kind of helps to release some of the stress that you actually have. That was the space I caught myself in when I was in the army. I used to work out
Mm,
like a bad man, bro, because I was angry. Um, but definitely ignoring stresses is definitely not. Increasing work hours definitely not. And avoiding social interactions, no. So the only answer here that actually makes sense would be B.
there
Unless you
you
know
go.
something I don't know.
I'm with B too. I mean, I could say avoiding certain interactions with certain types of people. I
Hmm.
say if I'm at work and I'm around the wrong people all the time, avoiding those interactions. Yeah. Um, increasing work hours. I think that if you wanted to be a doctor your whole entire life, you worked an 8-hour shift and you're like, man, I'm gonna work an extra 4 hours because I love what I'm doing.
Right.
I think in those, but those what I'm talking about are the minorities, not
Yeah.
the majorities.
Right.
So um, take it for whatever it's worth. Oh, we got some. I forgot. Here we go. We got some. What they called again? Scenarios. Scenarios.
Scenarios.
So the first scenario is about personal life. Michael struggles with anxiety and often feels like he needs to handle everything on his own. How can Michael begin to break down these barriers and seek support to improve his mental health?
So I would initially start off by he definitely needs an outlet. He definitely needs a group of people that he actually can be transparent and honest with and vent to. That's for starters. I definitely believe that he needs to go and sit down on somebody's couch and have a conversation because anxiety is worried about a future unwanted outcome. So just needing to understand what he is anxious about, why does that anxiety exist, so forth and so on. And the concern here for me is that he often feels like he needs to handle everything on his own. So it's not just anxiety; it also sounds like he might be a perfectionist as well. So now you look at anxiety, perfectionism, and when probably goes along with because of the perfectionism, he probably don't have a lot of people that he socializes with, so he might be a social introvert. And I say socially because it's socially acceptable to call yourself an introvert. It is cool to call yourself an introvert these days. Definitely that. So be open. Probably find something else to do. Find an exercise routine. Like go, running. Do some type of physical training to start to release some of that pressure within. So again, exercise, group of people that you can actually have conversation with, and then sit down on somebody's couch and drink some tea and get to the point where you're understanding what you're anxious about.
Yeah, some tea.
Yeah, man.
Um, for the second time, I'm gonna do one more, and then we're gonna roll out. We can do the love life one. Love life or fitness. Now we're gonna end with love life. All right. So John has been experiencing stress in his relationships due to work pressures. His partner notices that he's becoming more withdrawn and suggests they talk. How can John use emotional intelligence to navigate this conversation and improve his mental well-being?
This is chocked full of unknowns.
It ain't nothing but unknowns.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest concerns here is that John has been experiencing stress in his relationship due to work pressures. So, how are you allowing John? This question is for John. Why is it that work pressures, work stresses are actually being interjected into your relationship? That's for starters. And it just kind of reminds me of what I said previously. Like when we come home from work, you ask, how was work? It was okay. Like you don't really want us to share all of the because this is what happens. Sometimes we get
Mhm.
so we go back and relive the moment as we tell it to you, and then lo and behold, when you say, "Well, you shouldn't have done that," like, "Oh my God," you know what I'm saying? Now it's all going downhill. Right, wrong, and different. So I think the big question here is that being open and honest, she needs to express based upon her observations, and I think that's the key. Based upon her observations, she needs to express to John that she believed that he may be bringing too much work home, and it is creating a divide between the two of us. Okay, John needs to be open enough to hear it, and maybe get to the point of asking questions like, "How is it showing up in a relationship?" So forth and so on. So not feeling the need I'm sorry, getting to the point to where you humble yourself for the sake of relationship, listening to everything but don't feel personally attacked. From the communicator side, do not personally attack the other person. You talk about the facts and the facts alone. Don't even necessarily talk about how you feel about the facts yet. Just talk about the facts and what you notice the facts are doing. Then once you do that, then we can talk about how it feels. So now as you understand the fact, once you confirm that the fact is there, you recognize that you've seen that in yourself. Now I can share with you how I feel. And I just feel like when you do that, you're taking your aggressions out on me because you don't necessarily feel that you can do it at work. So now that takes on a whole different light when it comes down to it, because I'm not putting my emotions at the forefront of the conversation. If she doesn't do that to him, he won't feel attacked. He might be more open to the conversation. I think she gets I think she gets the resolve that she is looking for, which is a conversation that yields understanding. Once she goes into that conversation with an expected outcome, she is already behind the power curve. Make room for the conversation to flow as it should, but you just be transparent enough and be open minded enough for the conversation to happen. Too many times people go into a conversation with an expected outcome and then they
Mm,
get their feelings hurt because they didn't get what they expected.
yeah, great, great point right there. I just want to speak to the bringing the work home. I think there's two sides to this.
Hmm.
Because some people say, man, you got to leave everything at the door, and I 100% understand that, but I also understand that there's a differences in types of work that people do.
Right.
On one hand, you have people who may make bread on a construction, I mean on an assembly line, right? So once they are done, they're done. They've clocked out their 8 hours. They do not have to think about bread again because all they have to do is punch a button every 17 or 18 seconds. I'm just not trying to be funny. I'm just saying. And then I think on the other hand, you have people who may have to use their mind a lot while while they work. So they're all constantly thinking about something, their spreadsheet, how to be better at their job. So once their job is over and they've clocked out for the day, there's still that mental job stuff that they're thinking about because maybe they want to be successful, or that it's just a job that requires a lot of just thinking in general. Being in the military, once you clock out, it ain't over. You know what I mean? Because you may get a phone call at 10 o'clock at night. You may, have to go in at 4 o'clock in the morning for a urinalysis. So I think that there are certain jobs that you can always leave at the door. But I think sometimes there are jobs that bleed over in, into the relationship. Not necessarily saying it is right or wrong, but I am saying there's something that happened, and that's why you have to have those conversations with that person and be open and honest and transparent about it, saying, "Hey, look, like you said, what are some things that you are seeing in me when I come home?" And
Yeah.
letting her know, say, "Hey, look, I don't have a job where I just clock out. I'm still constantly thinking about things because I'm in charge of 30 other people on a constant basis." So I just wanted to put that out there.
Nope, I'm good. I'm good. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's facts.
yeah. And with that being said, we went over 7 or 8 minutes today, so we are not going to do actionable advice. We got some scenarios done and stuff like that, man. So with that being said, man, what is it that you have to say to end the show? Oh, before I do, I'll close this out anyway. So go ahead.
Um, Mental health is real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, focus on your mental health. Like, if you don't do it, like, you have to consider the less healthy I am mentally and emotionally, the less relational I am to other people. I don't really mean anyone else any good if I am not in a healthy headspace. So I just want to kind of leave it at that.
Man, I'm with that. And we will see y'all this Friday on the Empowering Perspective podcast. And then we will see y'all again next Tuesday for another great episode of Coach's Corner. And until then, folks, we are out. Peace.